Thank you very much. My name is Fred Houinato. I'm a project manager at Amazon, and I've worked for Amazon for 22 years now. And I'm also a member of the board of Enactus UK.
Excellent. So what got you involved in Enactus originally? What was it that brought you to Enactus?
So I have to go back a few years now, but one of our VPs, I think, came from Asda or Walmart. I can't remember. Same thing.
Yeah.
But but he was aware of Enactus from a previous company, is I guess the bottom line. And he was very keen on the program. And so he decided to trial it in the UK for us. So he just put a small team together of finance-minded people, because that's where it started for us. And yeah, we just, went to a couple of events. I can't remember which one, probably regionals, and then definitely nationals that year. And just got to learn about Enactus and what it stood for.
Amazing. And then you've been involved ever since.
Yes, that's very much the way I operate. I I tend to just keep going with things.
Well, we like that. So that's never a bad thing. Super. So today we wanted to talk a little bit about LinkedIn. So I guess in terms of the topic, one of the questions really is why LinkedIn? Why is it important for us to discuss it today?
I think again, if we go back, LinkedIn kind of changed a lot of things in the way we recruit, right? And I think every company leverages it at some level. Individuals and companies also use it as a social media platform.
Mhm.
And it's really business focused for the most part, obviously learning, but really kind of enterprise side of a house. And I think we've seen the last, I guess, 10 years where we've started with where we are now. It's always, I think, important to think about, okay, what does 10 years from now looks like? And so for me, it's always about that long-term view and kind of probably like a sense of belief of things are not going back, right? And so for me, like if I know things are not going back, it's always a question of like, if I have that certainty, where are we going, and just have your best guess. And I think LinkedIn is just going to play an ever more important role in the way we recruit. And it's unlike the old days. I think if one thing has changed is you can no longer wait for the time where you need to write your resume and your CV to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm very passionate about this topic, because I think for people that are studying, or even for professional, to be honest, people like you and I, not documenting what we're doing today and next year and the year after on LinkedIn is a problem, because if you don't document it, you just not building your CV in a digital form, and you won't be able to just fast forward 5 years and be like, oh, those are all the things I did. Because I think then people will look at LinkedIn and look at, okay, let's look at what you've documented on the platform for the last 5 years. And if there's nothing, then it's kind of like, well, you're saying you've done all those things, but there's no evidence of it, right? And so I think that's the way I think about it, is you have to document it as you go to an extent, because you won't be able to there's some things you can do on LinkedIn, right? You can say, update your history, your work history, but that's just the physical CV and resume step ported onto a digital platform. This is only half the story. Now people are going to say, okay, what posted you? If I say I'm very passionate about Enactus and I never post on LinkedIn about Enactus, I'm not tagged on any post on LinkedIn about Enactus, then how passionate really am I about this topic? I'm saying it, but there's no evidence of it. And I think that's the piece that people need to get a grasp of, because it would be more and more important.
Yeah, 100%. So it's almost like bringing to life your CV a little bit. It's kind of the story behind the old version of what your kind of physical CV would look like, I guess, isn't it? And it's adding color to some of those experiences that you have said that you've done, and it brings it in a real kind of way, doesn't it, in terms of what that then appears like, in terms of what you post about, what you like, what you share from your own kind of portfolio and things that you're doing. So yeah, I think that, like, I think you're absolutely right in terms of how important that is, because as an employer, it's one of the first things that you look at, isn't it, in terms of what people have done over the past however many years and what they've achieved.
Yeah, you're going to use it to get a sense of who this person is.
Hmm.
I think that's really what, you're trying to maximize your chances to get the right person for the role you have. And any information you can find about the person um, is going to be useful in that process. The same way, I guess, when you sell something on Facebook Marketplace and you get an offer, you're going to check the profile of the person in the
Hmm.
same way you would go on eBay and check the seller's track
Hmm.
record. Like, it's exactly the same concept. It's not something that's new, but it's just a different way of doing it.
Yeah, 100%. So in terms of how LinkedIn has maybe grown in the past few years, 10 years, 5 years, however much it's been, what growth have you seen in the LinkedIn platform? And where do you think it's going to be in the next 10 years, as you said before? Like, how do you think it will change?
I think it started just as almost like a you know phone book for professional, a way for you to kind of connect with people you've worked with or you're currently working with, and you may want to keep track of them, right? And so it's kind of like just a network kind of tool at first. I think the way I think of LinkedIn, but I think one of the things that is still true on LinkedIn today is the attention you get on content you post on LinkedIn is just amazing. And you would be hard pressed to find any other place where you can get that sort of attention for yourself as a professional or business with so little effort. It's
Hmm.
literally free.
Hmm.
Right? And so I think the same thing you find on other social media platforms are true with LinkedIn, where you do have a lot of underpriced attention. And the more you can leverage it, the better. And I think that's probably one of the big things that I've seen, with LinkedIn over the past couple of years, I'm going to say, where you can really talk about topics, you can drive engagement, and you don't have to force it. You don't have to put ads on it. You just do. And I think for any professional, it's kind of very little effort, which will help you as an individual, but also if your company is recruiting using LinkedIn, will help people choose your company to go and work for because of the people that work for it. And the only thing they can see about those people probably is on LinkedIn. Like,
Hmm.
how are you going to find out what kind of person I am as a professional, apart from working with me, which means you're already there, or on LinkedIn?
Yeah, 100%. So you think it will be used more for both businesses and individual, like, marketing, really, is what it is, isn't it? It's in terms of, like, selling yourself, I guess.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if LinkedIn evolves into a better service to companies and businesses, because a lot of companies have very extensive recruitment processes and tools and manpower to
Hmm.
find the right people. And the more you can facilitate that process by telling maybe a company, hey, you're looking for a social media person,
Hmm.
we have the exact right person and we can tell you it's the right person because they're very active posting and interacting. They drive a lot of engagement. And so, yes, they have the degrees and the qualifications you're looking for, but we also know they're very active in that space. And therefore, we think they're a good fit.
Yeah.
And so I think if you can provide that to a company by saying, like, you don't need to necessarily just try all those people out to see if they're going to work out. We can find better ways for you to assess. And so, and I think it's useful because it may be that you find people outside of maybe what you thought you were looking for. Maybe you had specific qualifications, but LinkedIn is thinking, like, actually, based on the data of what we're seeing on the platform, we think that person would be a better fit. And I think that's a big game changer, especially if it works out, right? Because then you kind of shift the view of companies on, do they really need to put as much weight on the qualifications and the courses and the university versus what's happening on the platform, right? And I think LinkedIn is in a great position because they already have all the businesses' attention and the people looking for roles. And so I think that's one of the things I expect to see going forward, and that, as well as, better ways to assess candidates based on what they're doing, how they're engaging. I think I obviously don't know what sort of data LinkedIn has, but given that we spend a lot of time on there and we post, and there's probably a lot they could, provide companies, which maybe they do already, right?
Okay, sure. Yeah, definitely. So with that in mind then, as one of our Enactus students, what advice would you give them in terms of like what they could be doing to stand out? Because it sometimes feels with LinkedIn, there's so much going on and there's now so many posts, like it's getting quite, there's a lot going on now on LinkedIn, isn't there? So what would you suggest to students in terms of advice, what they could do, maybe top tips on how they could stand out to really make a difference with their LinkedIn?
The one thing I would start with is, I don't think you need to stand out.
Okay.
I think that's probably the number one thing stopping people from actually being active. The fact that they're thinking about, oh, I'm not an expert, I don't know as much as other people, there's always great content, why would I do content as well? You should put all those aside, because you don't need to stand out. You don't need to be an expert. The only ask is, you need to document what you're doing, and you need to put out things you're passionate about or you have an opinion on. That's it, right? So all that you should be focusing on is not so much kind of like the outcome of all of this, but just have a process where you decide, I'm going to pick an article, I'm going to read that article, and I'm just going to do a, half page on what I thought about this article. And I'm going to post that as a LinkedIn blog. Because if you're into writing, maybe that's the best way for you to do it. If you hate writing, or if that's not your preferred medium, maybe you just do a short video, 30 seconds, summary of what you thought of that article. And put it out and just move on, right? You don't need to think about the impact, the metrics, how many people viewed it, liked it, whatever. If there's engagement, absolutely engage on that. If somebody asks a question, go and answer it. That's all that you have to do. And just do it for 2 years. Do it as a extra curriculum piece while you're at university. Because maybe it's not in the things you're being taught at university, but probably it should. And so you doing it consistently until you leave university will put you in a much better place. I truly believe that. And you don't have to think about what people will think. People don't care. So just go ahead and do it. But yeah, there's no pressure. Like
Mm-hmm.
literally, there's just no downside of you doing this.
Mm-hmm. So keep it simple and keep it consistent.
Yeah,
Yeah. Do you think consistency is a key part of all of this as well in terms of the amount that you post?
it is, because if you think about, people are interested in your opinion, in the content you put out. They maybe don't want to read those articles, and you putting a summary out is actually a great way for them to get that content, or to get a different perspective on the topic. Then the more you put out, not necessarily the more you put out, the more consistent you are about putting it out, means that people have a kind of a schedule, right? A regular where they're going to see it. And we go back to the algorithm. Like if people consume the content, LinkedIn knows they're consuming the content the same way YouTube and other platform knows you're consuming the content, and they will put the next piece of content back to you because they think you like it. You watched the last piece
Mm-hmm.
in full, and therefore next time something comes out. So the more regular you are, whether that's once a day, whether that's once a week, which is why I talk about process, right? It's better to just design something that works for you in terms of the timing, and just keep it regular. I think definitely consistency is key, even for the individual or the student himself, to have that regular thing that they do. They don't have to think about it too much. They just pick an article, read it, put some opinions on it. They could even do like a green screen on in front of the article, like you're starting to see a lot of content come in, and go with that.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. I think that's great advice for the students. So, in terms of Enactus, then, how do you think? So, I know that you've spoken about it a few times. How do you think teams and projects should be using LinkedIn effectively? Like, what things would you like to see from that angle of things?
I think there needs to be a bit of a shift in mindset
Mm-hmm.
when we think about teams. When you have a project, you should think of it as a business.
Mm-hmm.
From the day you have that idea and you create a team to work on it. And it's a key shift in mindset, because the moment you do that and you say, okay, what would a business need to do to survive,
Yeah.
basically, right? And having presence on LinkedIn is key for that business. It's key for some of the reasons we've talked about already. It's key because that business needs to have presence, right? So people need to know about it. It's key for that business to find people
Mm-hmm.
that may want to work in that business. And we're talking about, it may not be when it's an Enactus project, but it may be 5 years down the road when it's now a business venture and it needs to recruit people. So the sooner you do this, the better.
Mm-hmm.
And then that business needs partners, is going to need inputs from other businesses and nonprofits and coaches and university, you know, employees. And the best place to really do it, I think, it's LinkedIn
Mm-hmm.
right now. Of course, you can have face-to-face interactions with your coaches and your university advisors and the rest of the team. But the more you put it out, the broader that pool of people is,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you may find, people that don't know about Enactus. Most likely, you will find people that don't know about Enactus. The way you set up your page is actually like any other business would do. It doesn't necessarily have to say it's an Enactus project, right? You want it to look like it's a business because it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what I mean by the shift in mindset is, the sooner you make that shift to say, like, this is a business and we're going to operate it like a business would operate. So it's almost like, for a university team, you'd want to just look at maybe a medium-sized business, 20 employees kind of thing, that's active on LinkedIn and almost just copy what they're doing, right? How often are they posting? What sort of content are they putting out? There's going to be stuff that's focused on maybe getting more business for the most part, or employees, right? But I think for Enactus teams, it's more about almost discussing in public all the things you're working on, all the challenges you're facing, because that's going to be the most efficient way to find support, to remove the blockers and go forward. I think if teams did that more, they'll move much faster than they do today, because they would just get lots of people willing to just help, especially when you're a social enterprise for the most part, right? You're going to find people that maybe don't want to be involved a lot, but can answer a question about how do you effectively brew beer, right? Which is, one of the projects, we see coming from time to time in Enactus. And so I think it's really a question of like, how do you provide more visibility on what you're doing to the rest of the world so that you can really grow that network for that business. And you do that for every single project within your Enactus organization. And not all projects are going to survive, but that's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay. And so and back to our individual career and LinkedIn, the future of LinkedIn, I guess, 5 years down the road, when you have an employer that's looking at your digital CV, they're going to see you've worked for a year for this business and this business and this business, right? And one is, an intentional project maybe that focuses on water sanitation. One is about, sustainability. One is about homelessness. Whatever they are, I think most students in Enactus probably are going to work on, some of them probably on one project. That's okay. It's 3 years worth of experience working for a business.
100%.
And so it matters. But if it's not documented, right, if you haven't studied that business page for the project and that business doesn't have employees and those employees are the students, then it's just going to be a line on a CV, which most employers are not going to probably look at. But if there's content, if there's a real business, it's now an employment piece, right?
It brings it to life again, doesn't it? That's the whole thing. It brings it to life, and it gives the evidence behind it versus it just being, as you said, like a line on the CV. I also think there's maybe a benefit in doing things like that to diarize some of the challenges and obstacles for future generations, so that people aren't then making the same like mistakes, or they're not kind of getting blocked by the same blockers, because they can look back and go, oh, they did this and this is how they got around it. So I think there's a real benefit to having that legacy information as well, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I think, even if you think about an Enactus society in one university, the fact that they can point to 50 different businesses, 50 different business pages on LinkedIn is a big deal, right? Because you can say, oh, we've created 50 businesses. And it doesn't matter, half of them are no longer businesses because maybe you drop a project and you decided not to take it further. But it's your portfolio of companies. You've experimented a lot, and that's what you should be doing as an Enactus team anyway. But I think, it's a good register of the activity of an Enactus team. How many teams can today say, oh, those are all the projects we've done, right? It would be very difficult, I suspect, for most teams to talk about the past, because people moved, right? And so having something like on LinkedIn that that the teams have documented just because it's part of the process they follow, means that 10 years down the road, as the Enactus Essex, you can say, oh, here's the portfolio of Enactus Essex companies that were, created. And it does provide historical context for the new members of a team, 5 years down the road. And I know maybe, talking about 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, people don't necessarily think it's going to be important because obviously they won't be at university anymore. But again, it's part of you're an alumni of that Enactus society. And so to be able to point back to it 10 years from now, it may matter when you're looking for a job and you say, oh, I do have some experience in sustainability. You need to be able to point to something, right? And so if you can point to an Enactus society that has a portfolio with 25 sustainability projects, it's important. At least I believe it is.
No, I completely agree. And I also think that it's like, as an alumni who has now been out of the Enactus, like my Enactus team for over 10 years now, it's also important to remember what you did, because you can, it's hard to remember what projects you actually worked on at that time, because there were so many different projects and it's such a long time ago now. And then every now and again you might get a flash, go, oh yeah, we did that, and this is what it looked like. But if you've got that evidence somewhere, it makes it so much easier to be able to refer to, be able to learn from, and be able to help others as well do better as an alumni mentor or a coach or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I think down the road as well, with each of those businesses, you've built some audience, right? People that followed it as a business. And so I think for a team, 5 years down the road, to be able to actually leverage some of that reach, because they have a project that's slightly the same as this one, you could repurpose the business, right? You could just say, actually, this business is not going to change name and it's going to take a slightly different direction, right? That's what businesses do, right? So I think there's a bigger picture, kind of long-term approach to the way you manage, I think, those businesses on LinkedIn. That's important.
100%. So in terms of, again, maybe some practical next steps for us to advise the Enactus teams or Enactus students, what would they be? What would your next steps look like?
Well, I think step one, you need to create a page for every project. That's really your starting point. Step two, you need to make sure that all the employees of that business are listed on the people section of that business, right? And so, because then you have your employees. That's the two components that we said we need them to be there, is the business page and the students to be employees under the people section of that company, because then we can say, okay, well, you've actually worked for that company 3 years ago. It's documented. And then it's really a question of like, what is your strategy in terms of content with that page? I think it's a mix of what you're doing, and that should be the easy content documentation. You should be able to say like, okay, those are all the things we're doing. This week we've had a business meeting, or we met with business advisors to talk about some of the challenges we've had about this particular topic. Some of it needs to be engagement. So if you have a challenge that you don't necessarily know how to fix, or it's going to take time, or you decided to take a specific path to address, but you're not sure because it doesn't pan out just yet, then you can put that maybe out. And so I think that business should be very active in groups that are very, focused on specific topic, whether that's sustainability, whether that's selling online, whether that's, whatever it is, where you can find some expertise. Because I'd take a selling online group of 1,000 or 10,000 people to get advice on selling online over just about anything, right? Rather than going to one person. that may know some things, but is probably not going to know as much as 10,000 people in that group know. And so I think you probably start with that engagement and just the pure documentation of what you're doing.
And I guess with that in mind, like, it's one of those things where, as we said before, it's about keeping it simple and consistent. It doesn't necessarily need to be mind-blowing, engaging, amazing content that's going to be completely unique and different. It just needs to be there so that people can help and support and engage with you, isn't it?
No, absolutely. I think the more you can dissociate from basically what are people going to think or is that going to have impact, the better, and just do the content, right? Because it's much easier to just say, let me just record a video 5 minutes and post it. That could be done for any team literally today. The moment you start going into what equipment do we need, do I need a green screen, do I need this and that, like, it'd be 2 months before you even put anything out, right? And so you're much better off just putting it out, and as you do, then figure out maybe what did work versus what didn't work. And so maybe a path is we do more content like this, right? People really love the cooking recipe video, right? Do more of those and see where it goes. And then, of course, over time, like if you think that this is actually going to be potentially a much bigger part of the project, then maybe think about, do we need to reshoot that content from 2 months ago with better equipment, with a better setting in a kitchen so that it has more impact? Sure. But again, keep it simple, just start, right? And just put it out. You'll have plenty of time to figure out what works, what doesn't, and take action.
Amazing. So just as we're kind of coming to the end then, do you have any final comments or advice for any of the teams and students about this?
I think I probably would go back to the process. It's very easy to not do it, to stop doing it. And therefore, the more you can build around that in terms of mechanisms that are going to help ensuring that you do, the better. And so I would say, if you haven't done any of it yet as a team, definitely create a LinkedIn account if you haven't done, create your business page, and then put a date in your calendar as a team for your first piece of content, or for your first 5 pieces of content that is no further in the future than a week. So the moment you kind of listen to this, basically a week from now, your first piece of content needs to be out. Ideally, I want that piece of content to be out today. But if you have to put a date in because you maybe want to think about it and put it out, then a week, I would say. And then make it at a minimum every week. You put a piece of content and then review it to see, like, could we do every day? I think it's really having something in place that's going to challenge you to do more. Ideally, you do want to be putting out across your socials, right? Similar content, see what content works where. But a good target would be for a team to put out maybe 100 pieces of content per week.
100 a week?
And the way to think, the reason I say that is a piece of content, when I say that, people are going to have different view of what that is. They're going to think like, oh, this is a 30-minute YouTube video. It's like, no, you could, out of this video today, you could make 100 pieces of content, right? So really the way to think about it is, can you do 5 YouTube shorts in a week? Probably. It's a 30-second video. You just need a phone and basically shoot something, ask a question, answer it, done. And then you put those pieces of content on different platforms. So maybe you already have that one piece of content is now 5 because you're pushing it out on LinkedIn, Instagram, and other places. And then it could be a blog post, right? So I think the key here is you need to measure it, right? And then challenge yourself as a team to do more, because that's always going to be the answer. Doing more content for those teams is the difference between them being successful and not successful. And I think this is, to a large extent, more important than even the people on the team, how good the idea is. And yeah, just the answer is more.
Always more.
Amy.
And I guess it's about making it and as you rightly said, it doesn't need to be, you're not writing an essay every single time, are you? It's just about creating the information to really then build it and get some great stuff out there, really, to help celebrate and showcase what you're doing as a team.
Absolutely. And you see it all the time on social media, right? You could literally pick a question and go and interview students and ask the same questions to 100 different students, and then publish your top 20 because you think they're better, right? It doesn't take a lot to create a piece. They just need to really get started.
Excellent.